Yugoslavia was once a country in Southeast Europe, stretching from the Adriatic Sea to the borders of Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. It was an unusual state. 6 republics, multiple ethnicities, and 3 major religions living under one flag. By the 1980s, it had more than 20 million people, a strong industrial base, and even its own car industry, exporting the famous Yugo compact car to the West. Unlike the Eastern Bloc, Yugoslavia was not fully aligned with the Soviet Union. Under Marshal Josip Broz Tito, it followed its own path, socialist but independent from Moscow. Tito's Yugoslavia was also a founding member of the non-aligned movement, balancing between East and West during the Cold War. But beneath this seemingly stable facade, ethnic rivalries between Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, and others never disappeared. They were kept in check only by Tito's authoritarian rule. When Tito died in 1980, the glue that held the federation together began to dissolve. And in this video, we will talk about the Yugoslav Wars. Brutal, bloody, and devastating conflicts that tore a country apart and shocked the world. As already mentioned, Yugoslavia was a country of many nations and religions. Serbs were the largest group, traditionally dominant in politics and the army. Croats and Slovenes were economically more developed, closer to Western Europe in culture and outlook. Bosniaks, Albanians, and others added to the complexity, often caught between stronger neighbors. 3 religions, Orthodox Christianity, Catholicism, and Islam, coexisted uneasily. Tito's leadership was the key factor holding this fragile balance. He suppressed nationalist movements, redistributed power among the republics, and projected Yugoslavia as a unified, independent force on the world stage. His death created a vacuum that no one else could fill. By the early 1980s, economic decline, rising debt, and political fragmentation started to push ethnic identities above the shared Yugoslav identity. The stage was set for future conflict. How the Yugoslav Wars differed from other 1990s conflicts. A modern European battlefield. Unlike Somalia or Rwanda, fighting unfolded in developed urban settings like Sarajevo and Vukovar, with heavy industry, highways, and TV cameras everywhere. The CNN effect made sieges and atrocities globally visible in near real time. Hybrid war, civil plus interstate. The conflict began as the breakup of a multi-ethnic federation, then morphed into wars between newly declared states and remnants of the federal army. Regular units, territorial defense forces, and paramilitaries fought side by side, unlike the more clear-cut interstate Gulf War. State arsenals on all sides. The collapse of the Yugoslav People's Army scattered tanks, artillery, and air defenses across factions. That volume of heavy weapons in a post-breakup civil war was unusual compared with, say, Chechnya or Nagorno-Karabakh at the time. Ethnic at scale. Systematic expulsions, detention camps, mass killings, and the use of rape as a weapon marked the wars. The Srebrenica massacre in 1995 is legally recognized as genocide, placing Bosnia apart from most other 90s conflicts. Unprecedented international response in Europe. UN safe areas like Srebrenica and large, but lightly mandated peacekeeping. NATO's first combat operations like airstrikes in Bosnia in 1995 and the 1999 air campaign over Kosovo. A major departure from Cold War posture. ICTY Tribunal, the first international war crimes court since Nuremberg and Tokyo, prosecuted leaders from multiple sides. propaganda and media control as weapons. Nationalist broadcasting and disinformation helped mobilize populations and justify atrocities, foreshadowing modern information warfare. Long, fragmented timeline. Not one war, but a chain, each linked yet distinct, longer and more complex than most single-theater 90s conflicts. The collapse of Yugoslavia did not just mean independence for its republics. It also unleashed nationalist projects. Among them, the most powerful was the Serbian idea of Greater Serbia. This vision was promoted by Slobodan Milosevic and other nationalist leaders. The goal was to unite all Serbs into one state, even if that meant redrawing borders by force. Serbia claimed the right to control areas in Croatia, Bosnia, and later Kosovo, where large Serbian communities lived. To achieve this, Serbian forces supported separatist movements in Croatia and Bosnia. They armed militias, established parallel governments, and used the Yugoslav People's Army to carve out Serbian enclaves. The rhetoric was simple. Wherever Serbs live, that land should belong to Serbia. In practice, this ambition meant ethnic cleansing. To create territories that could later be joined to Serbia, non-Serb populations were expelled or killed. Villages were burned, civilians deported, and massacres committed. The wars in Croatia and Bosnia became laboratories of this violent project. The dream of Greater Serbia collapsed under the pressure of international intervention and military defeat, but it left behind destroyed towns, displaced millions, and a lasting scar on the Balkans. Slovenian 10-Day War. The breakup of Yugoslavia began in Slovenia. When Slovenia declared independence in June 1991, the Yugoslav People's Army moved in to stop it. But the conflict lasted only 10 days. Slovene forces, backed by local militias and strong public support, quickly gained the upper hand. With only around 70 casualties in total, this was the shortest and least bloody of the Yugoslav Wars. It showed how fragile the Federation had become, and that Belgrade could no longer hold the republics together by force. Croatian War of Independence. Croatia's war was much longer and bloodier. After declaring independence, Croatia faced a powerful Serb minority supported by the Yugoslav army. Towns like Vukovar were leveled in brutal sieges, and ethnic cleansing was widespread on both sides. For years, the conflict dragged on, until Croatia launched Operation Storm in 1995, a massive offensive that retook most of its territory. The war left tens of thousands dead and created one of the largest refugee crises in Europe since World War II. The Bosnian War. When Bosnia and Herzegovina declared independence in 1992, it triggered one of the bloodiest wars in Europe since World War II. The conflict involved Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs, each with their own political and territorial ambitions. The war quickly turned into brutal urban battles and campaigns of ethnic cleansing. Sarajevo, the capital, endured the longest siege in modern European history. Nearly 4 years of shelling, sniper fire, and blockade. Cities and villages across Bosnia were divided, with civilians often targeted simply for their ethnicity. The most infamous massacre happened in Srebrenica in July 1995, when Bosnian Serb forces executed more than 8,000 Bosniak men and boys after capturing the UN-declared safe zone. This atrocity became a symbol of the war's brutality and of international failure to protect civilians. At first, the international community was hesitant and divided. The United Nations deployed peacekeepers, but they were lightly armed and unable to stop the violence. Safe zones, such as Srebrenica or Žepa, were declared but left undefended. Humanitarian convoys often could not get through, while civilians starved or were shelled. By 1994 to 1995, NATO became more directly involved. Airstrikes were carried out against Bosnian Serb positions, first limited, then massive. After the massacre in Srebrenica and the shelling of Sarajevo, NATO launched Operation Deliberate Force, a sustained bombing campaign that weakened Bosnian Serb military capabilities. The pressure from NATO, combined with Croatian and Bosnian offensives on the ground, forced the warring sides to the negotiating table. The war ended with the Dayton Agreement in December 1995. But the scars of ethnic cleansing and mass violence remain to this day. The horrors of the Bosnian War were later captured in cinema, most notably in the film In the Land of Blood and Honey, which portrays the suffering of Bosnian women under occupation, giving a human face to the war's brutality. The Kosovo War. By the late 1990s, the last unresolved crisis of Yugoslavia centered on Kosovo. This region was historically significant for Serbs, but by then had a majority Albanian population. Calls for greater autonomy quickly escalated into armed clashes between Serbian forces and the Kosovo Liberation Army. The conflict was marked by mass displacement, killings, and widespread reports of atrocities against civilians. Once again, images of refugees and destroyed villages filled international media, fueling outrage across Europe and the United States. In 1999, NATO launched Operation Allied Force, an air campaign against Serbia to stop the violence. For 78 days, Serbian military targets and infrastructure were bombed, crippling the country. The war ended with Serbian forces withdrawing from Kosovo and NATO peacekeepers entering the province. This defeat shattered Slobodan Milosevic's power at home. By 2000, he was forced out of office, ending an era of nationalist authoritarian rule in Serbia. Macedonian conflict. Macedonia's path out of Yugoslavia was relatively peaceful in the 1990s, but tensions resurfaced in 2001. Ethnic Albanian rebels of the National Liberation Army clashed with government forces, demanding greater rights and autonomy. The fighting was limited compared to Bosnia or Croatia, but it threatened to destabilize the fragile new state. With NATO and EU mediation, the Ohrid Agreement was signed, granting Albanians more political rights and ending the conflict. The wars of Yugoslavia ended, but Milosevic himself could not escape their legacy. After losing power in 2000, he was arrested and sent to The Hague to stand trial for war crimes, including genocide. He died in his prison cell in 2006 before the verdict was delivered. His downfall symbolized the collapse of the nationalist project that fueled the Yugoslav Wars. The wars in Yugoslavia left deep scars. More than 100,000 people were killed, and millions were displaced from their homes, creating one of the largest refugee crises in post-war Europe. Entire towns were destroyed, communities torn apart, and the wounds of ethnic cleansing are still felt today. The Balkans today remain divided. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a fragile state with ethnic power sharing that often paralyzes politics. Kosovo is recognized by many countries, but not all, keeping its status contested. Serbia still struggles with the legacy of defeat and isolation. And while large-scale war has not returned, tensions remain under the surface, and nationalist rhetoric often resurfaces. the Yugoslav Wars showed that peace in Europe is never guaranteed, and that fragile states can collapse into violence when nationalism, economic crisis, and foreign interests collide.